Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Be Well reading series. My name is Nicole Tallman, and I am your host for this evening. And I have the immense pleasure of celebrating Pride Month with all of you fine people. And I could not believe it when I reached out to Richie and Amanda and asked them if they would read, and they actually agreed to do it because they are both such phenomenal, amazing, illustrious poets, and we should be very honored to have them in our company tonight. And we also have a couple of people joining us now, actually, from a class that Richie taught, which kind of united us all together in poetry. So I'm going to let you in while we get settled, and I'm going to give you a quick run of show. So we're going to have Richie kick us off because Richie just has this special energy about him that's really going to get us into the spirit of Pride Month. And Richie wrote this beautiful book called 100 Lovers. I mean, he wrote another amazing book called Second Empire, but 100 Lovers is his most recent book. And just to give you a little bit of background on Richie, he also, I'll read from his bio here. He has poetry that appears also in the Paris Review, the New Yorker Poetry, and the Yale Review. And he's been honored with the Ruth Lilly and Wallace Stegner Fellowships, and he teaches currently at the University of Chicago. So I'm going to have Richie start us off, and he'll read for probably about 15 minutes, but if he feels like reading a little bit more, that's perfectly fine. And then I will introduce Amanda next, and then I'm going to close us out with a few poems, and we'll save a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. So if you do happen to have some questions, you can pop those in the chat. If you're on the shyer side, I can ask them for you, whatever works. And if you don't have questions, I'll just think of one or two to ask myself. And I'm going to ask everyone, if you are not currently speaking, please mute yourself so that we can focus on our poets who are reading. Okay. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Richie. Richie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Nicole. Thanks to all of you for being here. Thanks to Emerge Literary Journal and Be Well Reading Series. It's really fun to gather, and it's really an honor to read with Amanda and Nicole, two people that I met in workshop, like so many other friends and beloved poets, and it's kind of a testament to the connections that we can make, even in the age of Zoom, with writers we love and grow with. So I'll just read a suite of love poems from my book, 100 Lovers, which is now in paperback, which I've been loving because it's just, oh, so portable. I'm loving it. Thanks for coming. I'll start with a poem called Museum, which is kind of the wedding vow of the book. From one room to the next, the gods are becoming younger. One's face is broken, but he still holds his flute and harp. For a week, I have wanted to be broken in your hands, offering nothing in return. The earliest pipes made of river reeds have disintegrated. I worry our hearts are growing cold. At the far end of the room, Mercury is a boy already. I will abandon you. I will come back. So poetry collections often go through many titles, and every poet thinks they are the worst person at titling and complains about their capabilities. But I think that must not be true because I like everyone else's titles. I just hate my own. But everyone thinks they're the worst at titles, especially for the book. It's just so much pressure. And so this book that became 100 Lovers was originally called You Couldn't Lose Me, which is the name of one of the poems, which I thought was really beautiful. But one of my mentors said after the fact, he said, it sounds like a mid-movie from the 80s when they ran out of movie titles. Um, so disaster averted in some sense. But it's retained in the title to this love poem, You Couldn't Lose Me. It was like waking up in California, the awkward blossoms, the sky an aggressive blue. I remember the smell from your armpits, the greenhouse windows covered in white paint, where the air was heavy, the silver weeds, a small herd of farm animals at the agricultural college wore the field to dust. The wind was hot and fresh on our faces. The donkey looked so dumb trying to walk. It was simple. Beneath your shirt was skin. I remember that first year, pulling your briefs from the hamper. Male beauty. I bought a bag of hard green pears today. I came home and sat in our room, listening to music for hours. Solo piano, things from France, from the beginning of the century. When we were very young, your forgiveness humiliated me. I knew you would be asleep when I got back. It is night outside and raining. It is the same night that fills the ruins. You are naked, drowsy, lost. Stay like that. In my favorite recordings, you can hear the pianist breathing. Lots of poets write about the seasons, such as Keats. This is my contribution to that tradition. It's called Summer and Fall. Fall I hate the most. Fall is the season of the end of love. All summer we were shirtless. We sat in foldable chairs, drinking white wine from plastic cups, reading sentences aloud from our magazines. I know I shouldn't become so attached. I'm embarrassed how much I need to hear the words. I touch the veins in your feet. Now I live in a city with no seasons. My nipples are soft. My heart, the heart of a cheating whore. Now summer is the season of leaving. Oh, maybe I don't usually read this one. Um, these poems are so embarrassing. All poems are quite embarrassing. But this is kind of a nightlife poem, good for Pride Month, and about feeling maybe a little alienated, even in a crowd. It's called Underground. My friend paid a little money. We waited outside above the stifling staircase. A muscled boy danced foolishly. Music pulsed through a window. A $400 puppy mask, light on our foreheads, the glasses sweating. His husband off to the toilets to snort cocaine. The room was full of shapes. I wanted to feel tenderness, but the love everyone was seeking, I already owned. All Sunday, I was like a baby with a long memory, not able to touch or kiss anyone, in the long twin bed with the lace coverlet. Beneath our skin, blood just beneath our skin. I dreamt I was on a leash. He kept yanking back. In Mexico City, we saw an angry dog on a choke chain, partially opened roses, alcohol over ice. While he held me, I woke to an obscene message from someone else. I hardly slept. I yawned through breakfast. I put on short shorts. I bought the cheapest roses and plunged them in water. I'm reading all poems that I love tonight, that everyone else hates, but that I love. Because I'm feeling free. This is called Mosquitoes. The summer the elderly died in their walk-up apartments, I projected my homosexuality onto everyone. The sea frilled like expensive lettuce. The beach became crowded with working class people. They sat in the dark sand, their dogs too free. A zapper killed mosquitoes baroquely. My teeth were yellow from coffee and wine. Every desire I had, I wanted enacted on the beaches, in bathrooms, in train stations, faded buildings with no air conditioning, the windows open. You couldn't drown out the noise. When the power was cut, it was like a new artificial night on my eyes. Oh, this is a slightly lusher poem for me. Um, about a gay icon, Marie Antoinette. And it has a very long title, somewhat uncharacteristic for me. I don't like when other people do it, which meant I had to try to do it myself. I think so much about becoming a poet is learning to resist your habits and constantly try on costumes you won't look good in. It's called At the Rustic Hamlet built in 1783 for Marie Antoinette, last Queen of France. No tourists, water turning a mill wheel, serving nothing but artifice. I am a servant to order and erotic love, soon to be yours. You take a picture of me by a trellis, both of us failing at the vernacular style. In the temple of the god of love, a naked boy clutches an arrow. Once, in the manicured pasture, they reclined, holding shepherd's crooks, noble women who pretended to be someone else, their wigless hair tucked into washed linen, their dresses fastened with ribbons. Even now, the murdered queen and her reassembled effects, making room for art. We throw out pieces of an unwanted batar, your gloved hand feeding the pond, the regal, monogamous swan, the hungry, whiskered fish you drop the bread on. I think in an early draft of that poem, I said, you drop the bread upon. And my mentor, the late Irish poet Evan Boland, who was always right, said, upon isn't really a word, is it? I said, all right. I did everything she said. Oh, maybe I'll end with this short love poem called Quail. It's about pet names. And the anarchic pull of lust. Quail. He addressed me as my quail, my sweet quail. He was easy to obey. It was a year ago in Connecticut. I remember the middle of his body, the beach, a hollowed out tree in the sand, changing leaves, the parking lot of a senior citizen's home. When will I see him again? I asked myself while I was with him, taking off my socks in the sand. And again the next day when I wasn't. And the day after that. And the day I woke up and there was snow on the tennis courts. Thank you. Thanks.
I wanted to unmute and clap after every poem, but I didn't want to break your flow, so I didn't. That was so amazing, Richie. And I don't know who's saying they don't like those poems that you just read because all of your poems are amazing. So who would tell you they don't like any of your poems? I'm not
Thank
sure.
you, Nicole. I have to believe that to keep going. You know how it is.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being brave and free and reading what spoke to you tonight, because I know sometimes it can be hard, especially with your poems, because they're so intimate that I can imagine it must be a little anxiety inducing to read at times. So we appreciate you. Oh, and by the way, Richie has an audiobook for 100 Lovers. And sometimes I listen to the audiobook while I read through the book, and it's really cool to see I mean, line breaks obviously indicate pause to a degree, but there's something about hearing you read it and then watching where you break and the breaths that you take and stuff. It's a really interesting exercise. I highly recommend the audiobook too if you haven't purchased a copy of it. So next up is my friend Amanda. And Amanda Merpaw is a writer, editor, and educator, and she is the author of the collection Most of All the Wanting and the chapbook Put the Ghost Down Between Us. Her poetry, playwriting, and nonfiction have appeared in Arc Poetry, CV2, the Literary Review of Canada, Plenitude, with Playwrights Canada Press, and elsewhere. And Amanda was a finalist for Arc Poetry Magazine's 2022 Poem of the Year contest. And she's also currently a contributing editor at Arc Poetry Magazine and a member of the editorial board at, is it Anthers? How do you say that?
And Strother.
Anthrother. Thank you. I wouldn't have gotten that press. Let's give Amanda a warm welcome.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, Richie is holding up the book. I thank you so much. Richie blurbed the book actually, which was such a lovely, beautiful experience. If you've ever had to ask someone to blurb your book, you know it's just this awful feeling of asking someone to do something in this like favor economy, right? Where we're all doing it for free, but it was so gracious of Richie to say yes. And I really appreciated that. Nicole, thank you for inviting me to be here to read tonight. It's very delightful to be back together after taking this just absolutely wondrous workshop that Richie led for us. Richie is a beautiful workshop leader. I know this isn't a Richie Love Fest, but it is. Like, what a delightful experience. I was almost done the manuscript for I was really done the manuscript for the book. And in the end, I added in a few of the poems that I wrote in that workshop just because it was so generative and so wonderful and such a welcoming experience. It was really, really beautiful. So I was so delighted to meet you both there, and I'm really glad to be here tonight reading from my debut, Most of All the Wanting, which has this beautiful cover. The French-Canadian artist Alexandre Levasseur is this beautiful painter, and we managed to get the rights for the cover of the book. The book goes through, it sort of chronicles my experience getting divorced very young, which is, an experience if you've ever done it. It's a party, a party, not a party. And then dating again in my 30s as a bi woman here in Toronto, and just trying to figure out I don't know what that is, what that means, and what being in relation to other people teaches us about ourselves, I think, more than anything. So I'll read you some poems from the collection tonight. I'm going to start with a piece called Ode on the Unspeakable, which is sort of after Sharon Olds. I come to see him in a new way now that I call him to keep close, and having called, no, he will not come. We have sometimes felt exceptional, but in the end, we're left like the rest. Someone says, I'm sorry, or I can't, or I almost want this, while someone else packs underwear, that good fig candle, an unopened box of condoms, the alarm clock. The only place to go together, growing tired and strange, like this condo that night, the winter fog curtained our windows, and we condensed ourselves to its tenor. Joni Mitchell record skipping, I wish I had a river, timbered and desperate for the vapor to deceive another street. And when it finally released us, he said, "Look, even the air can change." When we first loved each other, we were convinced this last hour was a long impossibility, when it was obviously just unspeakable. How disappointing, if not gauchely sentimental. After it's clear, it still feels like July even now, like last July and the one before that, and even the one with the vows. Binding our years to the carrying on, I say to him, "This isn't really anyone's fault." And he replies, "Don't make a fool of yourself. Why pretend this is something it's not?" I'm going to skip to the end of what is this first section, which is very much about the grief of the end of my marriage and what that experience was like. Um, and in this piece, I reference Jay, who comes up quite frequently through the book, and Jay is my best friend. And if you've been through anything traumatic, which I'm sure we all have, you know how much friends and chosen family are part of the experience of getting through that. And it was really important to me to include her throughout this book. So she makes many appearances. And this is one called Notes Toward a Theory of Otherwise. Days of happenings now come undone, done suddenly. Beginning is a state of elsewise, elsewhere a start of birds and weather. When I tell you I won't concede my life, I mean there is much to say about living, and time is already now a gesture of invention. I mean like myth. I mean a gesture of intention. I wake up alone at Jay's place, young and egg, and feel unreal. I wake up alone and feel meantime means meaning, and maybe I make messy. Maybe like most millennials, I'm obsessed with what's possible, what's next, what's left. Imagine intimacy. Imagine Dickinson. If your nerve deny you, go above your nerve. Imagine yourself. Look at me now, just look at me, above and alive, denied and substantial. Did I make a mistake, and when was it? Did I make a mistake, and who knew it? Did you? Days of dreams, and the thing is, it was you, but didn't look like you. I knew you anyway, always. I knew to insist on our tells. Oh, everlasting self. All I want is holding my own warm fingers across my face. I ask Jay, how does a person survive anything at all? Jay says survival is beyond language. All of us fold in on ourselves like waves, waving some degrees of free. Jay knows beyond survival, it's phenomenal. Momentum is constant. We move like light. My friend Jill, Jay, gives a lot of advice with like quantum theory and but like other forms of advice drawn from these moments, which as a poet I'm like eating up, of course. Like, yes, I would love to include the movement of light in how we talk about the advice you give me in this poem. Oh my gosh, I feel so inspired by Richie just being free to read whatever he wants. I'm feeling like I had like what I thought I was going to read, and now I'm like, maybe not. Maybe I'll just read what I want to read. Okay. I'm going to read from this. There's a sharp 180 to a very different feeling now. We're moving from that experience of grief to what it's like to date again and be in relation again. Okay. This is Obad in Yesterday's Dress. I don't know how the curtains were drawn, only that they're open. Outside, an inundation of rainlight. Call it morning. I dress cautious, watch my breasts reflected in the pane. I heard what you said, but I don't like to stay the night. I know the shape space takes, how to say thanks after I go. I anticipate the dark, the back seat of a car, indexing stars while my dog waits by the door. Where do you feel most alone? Last night, after the bar, you walk me to your borrowed room, take the slow and scenic route you've just learned leads you home. I too love to linger below a bloom of yellow lanterns, named trees looming above. Last night, after the walk, you wash a glass for me, pour water to its brim. I skim the edge, feet bare against tile floor. Some languages surprise me into longing. Some nights, a clean cup is enough. When I'm done, I press my thumb to the back of your small teeth, hook into the soft pulp of your cheek. Your bed is as good as you said it would be, and you in it. I like watching your tongue touch what it means to work, to be taught to want for nothing or anything or actually everything. Everyone wants a little, sometimes more. What about you? Have you enjoyed your life? Me? I take my coffee gold and sweet. When I get home, I'll push my nose into the beans before I grind them, fill a mug, let the steam clean my face. There's a romance to what's ritual. You're right, this is a lush street. I'm not sorry to leave early. Look, the puddle near the lawn. What I took for birds bathing are books you left out on the curb. Did you mean for them to drown? It matters how you care, even in the beginning. I unlatch the window, quiet now, hold last night's glass stained with my lips up to the clouds. I let drops pool on the pillow by your dreaming head while I drink fresh sky water down. That was the piece that was shortlisted for Poem of the Year, actually, at ARC a few years ago. And it's one of my favorites, but I tend not to read it because I feel, I don't know, maybe because audio exists of it on the internet. So I'm like, someone could find this, but of course, how many of us are going to look for audio recordings of poetry on the internet? Maybe in this crowd, a lot of us, but in general, you know. I'm going to jump to a piece that is much briefer than a lot of my other poems, and I'm sure that there's some Richie Hofmann influence in this piece, because when I read 100 Lovers, which I was reading as I was writing this collection, I just loved Richie's brevity and these like beautiful sensual observational pieces that are also shorter than I tend to go. I tend to be perhaps a bit long-winded. So there are some pieces that made it in here that were inspired, I think, very much by Richie's book and the workshop we took together. So I'll read some of those since we're here together. Portrait of a woman holding her. It is hard to imagine her face. It was night, maybe she was spring-cheeked. Both of us bearing some leg as the bars buzzed again, patio season. Across Dundas Street, the milky blaze of the AGO lobby spilled out its last guests. She said she loved Middlemarch better than anything by the Brontes, would charm Dorothea's rebellious brains out any day. A kiss in the alley. Did she start it? She unzipped, held me holding her without worry. Nothing happened next. There's lots of Toronto references in this book, so if you have not been to the city, perhaps one day you will, and you can conjure up all of these spaces. I will read just a few more. This piece, very much for me was written from, you know, some journal entries and then revisiting them a while later, after the experience of dating a woman who didn't want to be out about dating women, and how that feels, how complicated that is, and hurtful, while also understanding, right? It's like this very complicated, nuanced space to be in. And this piece is called Letter to an Old Lover After Years of Waiting. I write to you from the other side of my body. Do you remember my hands determined to perform in prayer? I'm still aware of my palms, how they fumbled benefaction, how my fingers stretched until they cracked. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about you, the scattered daylight in your room, a hint of swoon beating your neck. There were women before you, but I won't compare you to other women. It's like I said, you're the only living girl in New York. You've always had nothing to do but smile. It's true, half of the time we were gone and we didn't know where and we didn't know when. I still don't. Now here I am. I'd be lying if I said I've missed you. Do you remember that pizza shop on Main? The day you held my hand beneath the table. The fluorescent flood of fear consumed your cheeks. I just wanted to have a Diet Coke with you. I wanted to look at you more than all the portraits in the world, no exceptions. You were right. I picked the fight on purpose. Sure, I hated your take on motion sickness, but I hated your take on me more. Isn't that enough? Now we're both outside looking through. Do you remember the bar? You danced with that guy, a stranger, like you wanted to be watched, like you wanted to be caught. You knew I wanted to want you regardless of men, even when they enclose. Don't bother checking for any more poems. I'm over writing about what I took for softness, what I took for bliss. And was it? I could have sworn we were exalted by the fact of ourselves. Couldn't you tell I wanted to become myself? I could have sworn I said it. I wanted you to see me. I wanted everyone to look. There are some references in there to Phoebe Bridgers' motion sickness and Simon and Garfunkel, and of course Frank O'Hara. Um, uh, and yeah, I think that's it for that one. I'm looking at the time, which I realized I didn't check before I started. A classic mistake. I'll read two brief ones to close. How about this one I wrote in the workshop with Richie. It's called Sunday. It's an endless kind of Sunday, the first one of the month. At the Green Mountain Market, you make off with the basket. Call me over to judge petunias, yellow or white, the sun precise and souring my eyes. How good of you to want me kneeling near the basil plants, my hands empty and open and faintly citric. Love, I was full of it last night when, half a bottle of Riesling in, I asked if you were thinking of someone else. Even the moon's first quarter knew it. Now we're here, clear as cloud, your shirt split at the pits, cheeks flush with early heat. From a film of shade, I trace your brows, your knees, your sandals stained with summer. Sweating, you move on to the mint. And I'll close with this brief prose poem. There's lots of prose pieces in the book. I know you can't tell when you're sitting there listening, but this is an unpunctuated prose piece, so I'll do my best to read it aloud to you. It's called Bar with No Name, which is the name of a bar that used to exist in the city, this like amazing dive bar where my best friend and I used to go all the time as we were talking about our failing relationships. And they would let us bring in Dairy Queen from across the street because they had one dessert on the menu and it was a fried Mars bar and they never had it, even though it was listed. So there was this Dairy Queen across the street and they let us bring in blizzards and stay. And it was beautiful. It was wonderful. And they closed down, of course, as many great dive places do, as a result of gentrification. And it's now like a very bougie coffee shop. I'm sure no one is allowed to bring Dairy Queen into that place. This is called Bar with No Name. When I get there, I say to Jay, I say, how could we supernovas unfurl so domestic? It's not exactly like us. Jay's all, oh my God, yes, being an adult is a real game changer. How typical, we live kind. Jay's right and perfect. It's September. We're in this equinox together. It's true. Escalation can undo you, can't it? And the bartender is like, what are you two babes doing in a dive like this? And we lose it. We're easy. So I say, dying clearly. If you know, and he knows. Jay picks Lord on the jukebox, melodrama, what else? Everyone, I mean everyone sings along. It feels forever, eternally right here. This now relief, we're losing it. Galaxies entire, burning beyond rail. Rilke's right. We must change our lives. Really, Jay, static will breach, beast, beat us, matter us, mired, moot, myth. Jay's like, Haraway says life is a window of vulnerability, a function of possibility. Let's disassemble, reassemble, regrown, renewed, like universes thriving, wild, multiplied. I'll close there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda. So amazing to hear your work out loud. I so enjoyed you in our class together. And we have a couple, Lynn Lee joined us from class as well, too. And we have Fernie. So thank you for being here. I'm just going to read a few poems. And, I love that Richie just opened the door to us reading what speaks to us, to embarrassing ourselves, to just having fun with it. So the latest book of poetry that I wrote is called Versace. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it has a crazy Miami cover. And this was supposed to have been my Miami book, but Michigan kept creeping back in. I just cannot escape. And it's organized by seasons. And I was not planning on reading this poem, but Richie read a fall poem. So I think I'll start by reading a fall poem. And then I'm going to read a few poems that I added kind of towards the last minute, because after taking Richie's class, a lot of times people say, oh, you shouldn't publish poems based on prompts, or you shouldn't put prompt-based poems in a book. But if you have a good enough teacher who gives you really good prompts, then I definitely think they deserve to be published and they deserve a space in your book. So, who makes up these rules anyway? This poem is called Fall, and this one was actually inspired by a few poems by Victoria Chang in her book Obit, which is a beautiful book. Fall. Fall died on January 3rd, 2006, when I officially moved to Florida. Fall was my mother's favorite season before she died. I think it was probably mine too, but I'm no longer sure what I love. Do I just love everything that my mother did? The leaves falling from trees turning blue. They say blue is the warmest color, but I say it's orange. My mother painted so many stills of trees. She said her favorite color was red, but she painted all the leaves bright orange. I never asked her why. I was too self-absorbed to ask her much of anything. When my friend Elle mailed me 2 of my dead mother's paintings, I cried for days. All the bright orange I remembered had faded to brown. My mother hated brown. I fingered the canvases of our past for clues. They told me to look inside. So this next poem is one that was based on a prompt that Richie provided. And I actually dedicated this poem to you in my book, Richie, because it's just, I don't know, there's just something about it that reminds me of you. This is called The Velvet Room. In 5th grade, I carried a grape scratch and sniff sticker in my pants pocket wherever I went. I also carried a copy of a heavy faded book the school librarian reserved especially for me. Mrs. Woodward reminded me of a mouse being chased by an owl. Someone said something about her living with another woman. We weren't supposed to speak of it, although no one ever told me that directly. My sticker became my bookmark. By winter, my book smelled like an old vineyard. Even now, if I close my eyes, the curtained room, velvets and purples. In the spirit of embarrassing myself, I've never read this one out loud. And this was also based on a prompt that Richie gave us, which I didn't think I was going to be able to work some of these words into a poem, but I managed to achieve it somehow. I think Richie will remember some of these words. This is called French Education. The heat that Sunday summer in X, before you knew that I loved you. I met you for lunch in a long red dress, and you said I looked like a Victorian painting. We sat next to the Fontaine de Quatre Dauphins and ate purple olives and loaves of hard bread. We smeared them with cheese that smelled like sex. At least that's how I imagined it. Over sweating glasses of milky pastis, You handed me a list of books to read. Proust, Breton, Duras, and Guide to complete my French education. The heat that Sunday summer in X, before you knew that I loved you, before you unzipped my long red dress, before I seduced you after French class. I'm not going to read any more poems from Versace. I'm going to go in a different direction. So I started two books at the same time. One of them was tentatively called Dolce Vita, and the other one was called Let There Be a Little Light. I recently published Dolce Vita in a journal called Cultural Daily, and Let There Be a Little Light. I was lucky enough to have Only Poems take the entire series. So that was really cool. It's 10 poems that are 10 lines each. I'm not going to read all 10, don't worry. I'll just pick a few of those to read, but I'm going to read Dolce Vita because this is another one that was inspired by a Richie poem. And I tell you, you have to take a class with Richie if you haven't, because he has the best prompts and you're going to write some amazing stuff. Dolce Vita. I finished The Lover and we walked to the new food court that just opened. The sunset sends us to the other side of the street. We pass by a building with a balcony bleeding bougainvillea. The old city peeks through the reconstruction. An ad for perfume, leather, a liquor long ago expired. People pack the lobby like vultures on a deer carcass. A girl takes a selfie next to the bar in the center. Everything is silver, blue, and glass. The smell of roasted tomatoes leads us to Cicchetti. We order Prosecco and tapas served on small wooden plates. I like watching the man at the oven who makes our food. How he moves like pleasure is his only concern. So this Let There Be a Little Light series of 10 poems. I wrote these poems between the hours of 4 and 8 a.m. in the morning. And it was an exercise in writing during the hours that Sylvia Plath called blue. And some really strange things emerged. And I will tell you, I did not edit these poems very much. I'm just going to they're short, they're 10 lines. I'll read maybe 3 and then we'll end there. This first one is called White Light, and they're all named after a different color of light. White light. Who decides what's wrong and what's right? So many people suffered to perfect this drug. Before the irises bloomed, there were lilies. A warm frost covers everything snug. Moss and stone, all their insides grown green. I watch a nurse refill her gaping white jug. There's a field of snow and a field of sun. Do you want the frost or the hug? Take the white light in, and you can let everything go. The next one is Indigo Light. Look at the rain through the castle. Nothing is stranger than air. Here we go again, drinking rose water. I shut the door, but the light filters there. The light on the wheel is a centipede. The spokes are the strands of its hair. The lake holds the secrets of summer. 2 girls named Indigo once drowned on a dare. Their dull skulls scrape my tongue like rock candy. I taste their names like blue violets on air. Gonna end with Violet Light. Once a lady read my aura. I thought she'd say it was blue, but I was misled. She said, you are a sea of violets, an amethyst of chrysanthemums, an angel in the bluest of red. I didn't believe her and went Ouija, started seeing a dark spirit instead. When all the good spirits have vanished, you too will be fooled by the dead. Please don't look straight at them. Look at the clear lake instead. The moon some nights shines violet, and that's when it swallows your head. I'll stop there. Thank you so much for listening. I left us 9 minutes for questions. I don't know if anyone has anything they'd like to ask Richie or Amanda or me, but we have a few minutes left if you want to pop something into the chat. And if you don't, I'm happy to ask Richie and Amanda a question, but Oh my gosh, really, Fernie? What is poetry? You know, I'm going to punt to Professor Hofmann for what is poetry, Professor.
Poetry is a form of literature in which both the line and the sentence are units of meaning. That's all I have.
I like it.
Well,
Amanda,
and then some people say, what about prose poetry? And I say, no, that's prose poetry. It's different.
mm, okay.
But
Amanda,
I mean, that's a good definition.
I
There
think
are
that's
lines and there are sentences.
agreed. Amanda, anything you want to add to that? What is poetry question?
Oh my gosh, I can't believe Fernie asked us this. I think that's a beautiful answer. I also think about sound. Sound, like sound as a unit in the poem, I think is very, I don't know, is important as well. I'm not gonna try to answer what is poetry.
You know, there's a
Fernie,
beautiful,
we love Fernie so much.
yeah, I can believe Fernie
Fernie's
asked that.
trolling us.
Yeah, and Fernie, I feel like asking you what is poetry. There's a beautiful short film by Cecilia Zavicuna. What is poetry? It's all in Spanish, but it's if you speak Spanish, well, even if you don't, there are subtitles, I think, in English, but you should listen to it. She goes around and she asks these different people, what is poetry? And the answers that she gets from people are just astounding. Um, yes, Fernie knows what I'm talking about. Okay, well,
So,
Fernie, what is
Nicole, I had my students do this in the winter
Mhm.
quarter. They had to make
Okay.
their own documentaries called What is Poetry to You, where they had to go around Chicago and interview random strangers asking them this question. And the responses are astonishing.
Do you have is there somewhere we can see it? Is it public or just private?
Well, not really, because I didn't want to put up their work. But I was really surprised by the responses they get. Because the question isn't what is poetry, but what is poetry to you?
Right.
And that's a very different question.
That's very true. Um, I'm looking through the chat to see if somebody, there are a lot of comments, but I don't know if there are any other questions. Let me see. I don't think so. Well, I'll ask a final question with the few minutes that we have left because I'm just so interested in this as a poet. I'm curious how you went about putting your book together. But both of you, Richie and Amanda, and you can give me like a short answer, but in terms of actually compiling the book, were there poems that you added towards the end? Amanda, you mentioned that you did that, and I did also as a result of our workshops, but some that maybe you had in there that you decided to take out. How did you decide on the structure for your book, Richie?
Well, it's hard for me to do myself, so I always employ a friend. Her name is Cara Vandegraff. She's one of my favorite poets. Like all of us, I met Cara in a workshop together with Henri Cole as our teacher back in 2011. And we stayed friends. So she really helps me. But my process has usually been to write a lot of poems, as many as I can, over 5 or 6 years. And then we kind of whittle them down. So like I might, for me to write a book of 48 pages might require 90 pages of poetry. And then I just cut everything really ruthlessly until the kind of shape of the thing emerges, if that makes sense. So it's kind of creation by subtraction or through subtraction.
That makes perfect sense. What about you, Amanda?
This is a great question. I felt very intimidated because it's my first full-length collection. I had done chapbooks before, but it's a lot to jump from 15 to 20 pages to 80 pages. It was quite overwhelming. I mean, the chapbook sort of formed the foundation of the themes in the collection and some of the repeating images and ideas. So I knew from that experience, I started writing from there forward that I wanted to think a little bit about how I could expand what the chapbook was. But I also wrote, I mean, since it was my first collection, I had lots of pages that didn't make it into the book, lots of poems that are not here. And when I was finished writing, I went away. I did a residency here in Toronto. There's an island called Toronto Island. Um, and there's a beautiful art center there, and it's wonderful. You do not feel like you're in the city. And I went there with all my pages and just put them all out on the floor in this room overlooking the lake, and spent a lot of time with scotch tape and post-it notes and just moving things around. And I think I realized I read a wonderful anthology called Marbles on the Floor, which came out recently, last year, 2 years ago, maybe. That are essays from poets talking about the process of assembling their collections. And I thought a lot about a few different ones, but about like musical movements and how pieces of music move, and also about um, the end of the line of one poem going into the beginning of the line of the next, like thinking a lot about the movement from one piece to another. Um, and then was really in the end also thinking about, there are a lot of time stamps in the poems. The poems reference time very much, and the month or the season, um and also because they engage with chronology a little bit, the divorce into dating, that sort of thing. So I was guided a little bit by that in creating the sections, and there's 4 sections in the book, guided a bit by not wanting to confuse the reader about, like, is she still with this person? Are they not together anymore? So I did have to think a little bit about that, just because there was a chronological element. Yeah, so all those things came together. And in the end, my editor made very few changes to the order that I sent him, which was shocking to me, because I know some editors are like, we are starting again. This is not the order. He cut a few poems and moved a few. Um, but otherwise he was quite happy with it. So it felt like I had sort of landed on the right, I don't know, I feel like it was the right movement between the pieces for the book.
Yeah, I think that's
Oh, can I ask you about that beautiful sequence of poems of light? How do you see that fitting into a a kind of book project in some way, or do you see them as their own separate suite?
yeah, gosh, I've been kind of sort of shopping around a book that's printed. Do you know what Tet Besh is? Where it's like one side is one book and then you flip it and it's another book. So one side of it is Dolce Vita, which is a collection of about somewhere between 15 to 20 poems, depending on which version I choose to send out. And then the Let There Be a Little Light series is the 10 poems. I'm more of a chapbook kind of person. I write the full lengths because I feel a little bit forced to do that, but I like to write things and move on quickly. It's just kind of my personality. So, yeah, right now I kind of have this flip book in mind if I can get someone to pick it up, but I don't know if they're going to or not. When Only Poems published it like that as that suite, I was very happy that I had that out in the world. I mean, you're not going to be able to get someone to print 10 poems, right? That's not ever going to be anything. So that's why I thought maybe I could make it part of this flip book. And I'll tell you, Dolce Vita, those poems, I actually translated all of them into French. I took the time to do that too, because one of the other things that I love to do is to write and read in French. And I'm kind of a little bit all over the place, and sometimes I probably need a friend like Kara to like rein me in a little bit. But I had imagined that maybe Dolce Vita would be a book on its own, and it would maybe have one side of that would be English, and then you flip it, and the other side is French. And then I had this idea of maybe instead of doing the English and French, because I just don't know how it would market, to do the Let There Be a Little Light and then Dolce Vita. So I've got, how it is. I've sent this book out in multiple iterations to a bunch of different places, and whatever anyone ends up biting on is what's going to end up in print. So thank you for the question. Did you have an idea? Is that why you were asking, or?
Well, no, I just love them, but I was thinking, like, do they all, do they stick together as one sequence, or is there a way that in, a kind of, all of these book forms are so arbitrary, whether it's a
Right.
chapbook or a full, they're just technological things. But if you had a kind of full length book with these light poems that kind of throb and thrum in between, elements of the Dolce Vita, could also be a kind of interesting texture.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to really think about what to do with it. I mean, I kind of just leave it to fate where I just put something together and I put it in different forms and just shoot it out into the wind. And then if somebody picks it up, that's what ends I end up going with. Maybe I should be a bit more just, like discriminate with it. I don't know. I just kind of leave it up to fate to choose what they want me to put in print. It's worked so far, strangely. None of my other books had sections either. The first two were sectionless because I said, no, I am not putting my book in sections. But then the last editor that I had for ELJ edition said, I want you to I think I want you to have sections and a little bit more organization. And I said, oh God. So then I decided to organize it by seasons and the seasons that I lost when I moved from Michigan to Miami because it's always summer here, which is a good thing and also a little bit depressing, quite honestly, when you're used to having 4 seasons. But yeah, so I don't know. I'm open for feedback if anyone has any ideas about what I should do with the Let There Be a Little Light series. Totally open to that. But I don't want to take up too much time from people. I know people have other things to do, but I really do appreciate everyone spending this hour with us. And we do this season once a month, usually on Thursdays. I'm kind of on the fence about what I'm going to do about the July because July 4 is the 4th of July holiday. So I may do it on the 2nd, or my birthday's actually on the 3rd, so we're not doing the 3rd, but or we may just do August. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, please stay tuned. And I'm going to download this recording. I'm going to share it on social media so everyone else can enjoy it. And Richie and Amanda, thank you so much for reading. I love you both. You're amazing. And happy Pride Month to everyone. And just take care, be well, and have an amazing night, everyone. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
Nicole.
Nicole. And congrats, Amanda.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Congratulations, Amanda.
Thank you so much.
Hope to see you all soon. Take care, okay? Bye-bye.